go. I believe we are live. Welcome back, folks. Thanks for tuning in again if you're here, and thanks for watching later if you're tuning in after the fact. So tonight, and I want to kind of jump into this because I think this is going to take quite a bit of work. What we're focusing on is now part 4 of this build of the new cheat code docs. So what we need to do tonight is focus our efforts on figuring out, I guess you would call it like the foundation of the CMS integration. So let's jump into the browser real quick here so you can see this. So this is what we've been working with up until now is just the docs front end. But the thing that I want to focus on tonight is the CMS. And I think I started this up. Let's see. I did. Yeah, so I've got a custom CMS that I set up for CheatCode specifically. And what I want to do tonight is start to extend this so that we can add support for managing this documentation. And that is a little bit different. I don't know if I mentioned this when I first started, but it's a little bit different than what I intended at the beginning, because I was thinking like, oh, well, I can just do markdown files or something like that, or just use like a Gatsby type of thing. But then I was like, well, you've already got the CMS, and it would be nice if I can get a little more customization around this stuff. Plus, it'd be fun to live stream, so I figured, hey, why not? So what we're going to do is start to connect the dots between this front end with the docs and this back end through the CMS. And if you don't remember from last time, there's actually 3 pieces at play here. So there's the docs site, there's the CMS, the thing I just showed you, and then there's also the API, which is where we were actually managing the data. So the API is like the main hub that connects the GraphQL server to the MongoDB database and everything else. And then you've got the docs site, which is a Next.js front end, and then the CMS is also a Next.js front end. And so actually, I should say this now. If you haven't checked it out already, head over to cheatcode.co/tools. That's got the Next.js boilerplate that was used to build and prototype all this stuff out. So you'll be using the exact same tools that I'm using here. So whatever you learn tonight should look fairly familiar. I think if I remember, because I built a lot of this stuff several months ago, I'm almost certain that the docs site is definitely the new Next.js boilerplate. It's the CMS. Yeah, so the CMS was like the prototype for what actually ended up becoming the Next.js boilerplate. So you've got the fancier version that you can get access to up on GitHub. So if you haven't already, haven't played with it, maybe you have a project in mind, go ahead and clone that. If you're on GitHub, start it. That helps me. That lets me know that you guys are interested in this stuff and I should keep working on it. So without further ado, let's jump into this. So what I want to do is get my bearings first, like usual. I get scrambled. Excuse me. So we've got our docs. Yeah, so let's go back to docs because I was actually thinking about this. I noticed that I forgot the exact routing that we came up with. So if you haven't watched the last stream that we did on this, the thing that we were pretty much entirely focused on was getting this routing set up. So before we kind of had like a messy routing system, but what we did is we swapped it out so that you've got your main docs route, and then you've got a project name followed by either a piece of documentation. So like here we have these top level documentation like introduction, getting started. So it's either like Next.js boilerplate / introduction, or if it's nested under one of these groups, you would get something like components, creating a component. And it's not loading any data, and I mean, I can't really remember if that's because I wiped the database or something's broken or something else. So what I want to do is start there. And like I've said in the previous streams, the whole point of the first, I don't know, sometimes it takes 10 minutes, sometimes it takes half an hour. But the first little bit of time that I spend working on any project is just that. It's just getting my bearings because I forget a lot. And if you're jumping between a bunch of different projects, or maybe you're working on something at home for fun, but you got to deal with stuff at work, you're probably familiar with that brain clutter that you get. So I don't really have any expectations to start. I just say, okay, let's find the way, let's get our bearings for where we're at, and then start to get into the serious work. So, first things first, let's pop open the docs collection, and that might explain what the problem is. Oh no, that's old, so let's delete that because we renamed it, I believe. Oh, there you are. Drop collection, yes please. Okay, so we've got documentation, and we changed these by hand. Yeah, so we've got Next.js boilerplate, we've got sections, components, pages. Now see, I'm thinking that we already did, this is the first one. Yeah, introduction. Does this have a section ID? No. Okay, so let's see, because there might be a goof with the routing that I forgot about. So we're going to say /introduction. Is it like this? Yeah, that was it. Okay, so I had instinctively, when I was setting this up for the live stream, I had put /docs at the root, but we got rid of that last time. And the reason why, if you don't remember, is that we're going to have this hosted at docs.cheatcode.co. So the end goal is that all of the documentation across all the projects for CheatCode are going to be on that one site. And so we don't really have to add docs to the URL because it's redundant. So we'll just say docs.cheatcode.co/project name, so on and so forth. So with that, that's actually good because I was a little concerned. I was like, I don't remember. So let's see here. Yeah, screw out. There it is. Creating -a component, and I believe this is under components. So just as a sanity check, creating a component. Oh, well, it would help if we don't try to use the production URL. Let me make sure you folks can see everything. It looks like you can. All right, so we are back here. So did that. Oh, used the wrong URL. There we go. There we go. Okay. All right. See, like I said, gotta get in the groove. Okay, so this is good. So just to catch everybody up. So we worked on our routing last week. We got some actual data rendering back from the database. Technically, we did that, I think, in episode 2 of this series. But last week, we got it really finalized and working in a nice pattern. So now that that's set, we get into the CMS. And this is going to be a little bit difficult. So what will be cool about this is you're going to get to see how hard it is, even after doing this for, 15 years now? It still takes time when it comes to coming up with data models and things like that. So one of the things I've got with me at all times is a notebook and a pen. So you might see me put my head down for a second and sketch something out while we're doing this. Because I'm like, is that going to work or is that going to screw this up? So, and at some point, I would like to get a camera so you guys can see that because I do that pretty often. So during these streams, it would be good if you could see that. So let's see here. So the first thing I want to do is familiarize myself with the actual structure of the data. And if I remember, we kept it fairly flat. So we're just associating, yeah. So each page has at the very least a documentation ID, but might also have a section ID. So there's already, yep, see that quick. I'm already going to the notebook. So one of the things that I'll do, and I'll hold this up for you guys. So basically what we're doing is you're drawing boxes. So I think about my data as boxes within boxes if I'm doing a nested model like this. So the outer box that I'm going to have is the actual what do we call it? Documentation. And again, I'll show this to you in a sec. So we've got our documentation, and then we've got our sections, potentially. So we've got sections, and then we've got pages. Duh. So you got, okay, so we got documentation. And again, this is like a fourth grader scrawling. I don't know if you guys can see that, but yeah, not really anything serious, just enough for me to get a visual of what this is without having to memorize it all in my head at once. So with that, what that tells me is that we're going to have a UI that's fairly similar to, I think it's how courses work in here. What's Next.js doing? Oh, it's just taking its time. Okay, so let's set up a new course tester. And if you're saying course, what is this? So I built the whole courses system into this before CheatCode actually launched, because I was hoping to get a course launch for you guys when I launched, but it was just too much work. So this is coming soon, and if you haven't checked out or you haven't heard about what I'm working on, go ahead and head over to Twitter and go to twitter.com/cheatcodetuts. And I posted something this morning. It's a little teaser about what I'm working on. So the first course is going to be on implementing a full-blown WebSocket server. So keep an eye out for that. And that should go live in June, I think. I finished the code today, so now I got to write it and package everything, but I think June will be it. Okay, so the point I was making is this already has a pretty good visual model for how this works. So the way courses are made up is you have a course, that course has sections, those sections have lessons. So if I add, say, another, and we'll shout it, and then we can add lessons, so lesson 1 in another. So what I'm thinking for the documentation is something very, very similar to this. The problem, though, is that we don't always have a section, so to speak, that we can group with. So again, we have to support individual documents as well as the sections. And if we go back here, I think it'll work. Yeah, so this is all drag and drop. And that is ideally something that I want to go through while we do this, is show you how I use stuff like drag and drop to speed up the process of managing the content, because it really does help. I used to do it by hand in the database. Like I'd come in here and it was an absolute disaster. So we'll take a look at that. But I think this is the basic model. So the only thing that I see that we really need to do differently is create, it would be like one big box around all these two sections. And then the rest of it is identical to what you see right now. So you basically have one big box, which is everything. And then you can drag and drop individual posts or list items in and out. Yeah. This will be interesting. So let's start with the easy stuff. Let's close. Where am I looking at? Oh, I'm looking at docs. So let's jump to CMS. So the first thing we're going to do is docs. I'm going to kind of fudge this. And what I mean by that is technically, the first thing we should do is do the index where we list out all the different documentation. But because the interesting part of the stream is going to be that editor we just talked about, I'm going to skip the index part and we're just going to focus on the individual documentation editor. So, and I think what I did in here, so on the website we use slugs for everything, but in the CMS I just use IDs since it's just me using it. I don't really need to reference it. You know, this though is important for SEO. So back over here we're just going to use IDs. So the thing, where was I? Oh, I was thinking over here. So for the docs, and remember that we talked about this before with the main docs site. So we have to use variable route names because things are going to change based on it. So hold that thought. Yeah, what did we do on the docs site? That's right. Okay, so we made project slug. So it's actually going to be very similar to this. Very similar, yeah. Because you're basically saying, okay, yeah, it's actually these two, but you're going to add an extra layer up. for docs. So we're going to say back over here. Yeah, docs, and then instead of a file, we're going to need a folder. And this is going to be, so it's going to be, let's type that out. It's going to be /docs/ so this is going to be documentation ID. And I think that's it. Yeah, because everything else is going to be on that page. So I take it back. This is going to be a file. And watch, I'm going to change my mind. I'm like, oh. So say documentation ID. And remember that the square brackets in Next.js, that's how you say this is a dynamic value. So what that means is that that part of the route is going to be different. It's going to be dynamic. It's not going to be the same value every time. So now, let's see here. So most people grill me for this, but I love classes. And I know what you're thinking. Oh, but you can use hooks, and you can use stateless functional doohickeys and all that. It's like, I don't want to hear it. And for the record, because everybody fights me on this, this is on the front page of the React docs. This is what they show you when you first start. So I don't want to hear all your newfangled, youthful hooks nonsense. And I'll just sit in my corner, talking to myself like this. All right, documentation. Well, we can do documentation. I know I called it. You know what? That's going to make my eye twitch. So let's get that guy. So we'll say documentation, but I'm going to change this from documentation ID, even though it's technically correct. Because otherwise that's going to make me go insane. Okay, so we've got our base file. So let's put some junk in here just so we can test it. And we'll say some project. Save that. This, I'll just turn it to a comment. Okay. And then I want to throw something. Nah, we'll worry about that later. So let's just do it by hand to start. So we want docs/tester. There we go. So our layout's messed up, but that's easy to fix. So when we've got the some projects, so that routing should make sense. So then next thing we're gonna do is start to skeleton out what this is gonna look like. So we're gonna say style documentation. And this pattern that I'm using for the styles is exactly the same in the Next.js boilerplate. So what I'm using is style components. And the way that I set this up, because the structure with Next.js folders is kind of weird. If you've used any of my other boilerplates, like the Meteor one that I was maintaining in the past, which, yes, I'm working on it, and it'll come back. But like that one in the past, I was able to split my page components up into individual folders. So I would just have some component name as the folder name, and then inside of that, index.js was the component, and then styles.js was the CSS. This is a little bit different. So the way that I do it is, which is kind of cool that this worked, I say, okay, the exact name of the file .css, meaning the component file, .js. So with style components, you're technically writing JavaScript. So the file you're working with is going to be a JS file. But adding the .css gives your brain that little key to be like, oh, okay, this is a CSS file. And what's cool about it, this was actually surprising. I thought my compiler was going to throw a fit. You can technically say documentation.css, and because the build process inside of Webpack will automatically try to resolve .js extensions, it works out. So even though there's technically not just a plain .css file, because there's a .css.js, it works. So gives you a nice little structure there. So with that, let's save that. And let's put something back in. Let's say testing. Okay, everything's there. So what am I looking for? So let's go to courses. We'll just riff off of this. We got course ID, lesson ID. You want index, yeah. So what am I missing? I feel like I have a layout component or something in the CMS. Yeah, I do. Some weird little habits that'll creep into my work, because that's not something that I would normally do. But and what I mean by that is I wouldn't really have this individual page thing. That's a very strange concept. I would typically do, sorry, my brain's trying to play catch up here. So I think we have this in the docs. I would do something similar to this, yeah. So I would have a layout file, not just a random page component. And maybe this isn't actually what this thing is. Well, that's kind of what it is. There was a point to that, but I can't tell you exactly what it was. Let's see, course ID index. And if you're wondering, this seems really unstructured and he's all over the place and he's just mumbling a lot. This is literally what it's like. So get cozy, grab some popcorn, settle in. I am a maniac. But typically speaking, or generally speaking, you know, something valuable pops out at the end of all that mania. So it's worth hanging in there. What am I looking for? And I'll do this too. I'll just like wander back and forth between files until my brain catches onto what I'm trying to do. Okay, so I was looking for that container because our stuff is still not centered. And then I also wanted to see what is the deal with this page in relation to headers and all that. Oh, okay, yeah. So you got list header. Okay, this makes sense. So the reason I made this page component, you're yapping about the path. It's probably just dot. Was that right? Hey. Okay, so yeah, what I was doing inside of the pages, let me make sure I put this in right. So it's inside of the container, was adding a header where you've got like, what is the title of the thing that we're working on? So instead of course title here, this will be Next.js boilerplate. So the project that we're working on the documentation for. And then we'll say, yeah, we got two buttons here. So we'll have new section, that stays. And then we'll also have new page. Interesting. And how did I do this? So I have modals, which I don't really like. But what's the goal? So the end goal, did I break it completely? Yeah, let me save this. There you go. Beautiful. The end goal is to do something like this. So what I mean by end goal is where you end up as you're working on this. So if you get to, if you get to one of the pages in the documentation that you want to edit, I want to reuse this editor that I've already got for tutorials. So basically what I want to do is say like, okay, the end route that you're going to end up at is this editor. And so we need to make sure that everything's structured so that it falls into that. So if we're doing modals, we're basically going to say, okay, when we add a new section, sections will just get added and show on that page when we add, yeah. So this is going to be almost identical to what we saw with the courses. So if we jump back, so we've got our course, and we've got our index, and so we'll add sections, which will be actual sections, and then when we add pages, what I think we'll do is we'll just add them to the root by default, and then you can come back to this page and drag and drop them into the section, if there is a section that they belong to. which will be very interesting to work out. So I want to get rid of this. And yeah, see, I'm starting to think we need to add the navigation element, because I'm going to keep forgetting stuff. And why is that? Probably because I've associated something with a class somewhere. List header. So let's go to that page component and check. So you have button primary, margin left 20 pixels. Because it thinks primary is second. Yep, there we go. Okay, so you have new section, new pages. And then we've also got, I'm gonna call this, we'll say, documentation, sections, pages. And in case you're wondering, so sometimes, and I'm very wishy-washy about this, just depending on where my head is at. So sometimes I'll create individual style components, then I would import it up here. So if I did this, it would be something like documentation, sections, pages. But I try to avoid that unless it's just too much stuff that's going to go into that main style component. So that's why I put style documentation at the root, is because I want all of the styles to apply to that page as a whole, not just individual components. And that's purely for preference and stylistic choices. That doesn't really have any technical implications. So in this case, I'm just going to say, let me do this, and just to make sure this is clear, in our CSS for this thing, now I can do that, and I'm still targeting immediately within this style documentation component. So it's similar idea, except I'm not doing like export const styled, blah, 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 whatever. So documentation, sections, pages, and in my head I've got like a gray box idea here. So we're going to say padding, 20 pixels. Add a border radius. And we got to save this. We'll say list. There it is. Okay. Yeah, that's about what I wanted. So now what's going to happen is we want to have our sections inside of, our sections and pages inside here. So this is the hard part, because technically what we're going to try to do, and I think this is semantically accurate. I think. Should be. Yeah, it will be. I'm just going to tell myself that for the comfort factor. There you go. That's our, we'll use comfort factor. That's our test data. So we got comfort factor. And you know what? Before I get too rowdy here, where'd the courses go? Is it lesson? Yeah, this one. Okay, so tables, that's what I thought. So I did it with tables, and then I relied on sortable, and we'll talk about this once we get to the drag and drop step of this. Yeah, okay, so I've got table as each thing, but now, and this is where the pen comes in handy. So you've got an outer box, and then you potentially have table items, or table rows. And then some of those rows may be single rows, like they're single pages, or they might be sections. So if it's a section, that's like a whole other table, which means that we're not going to do this as this. Let's try and spec this out. So we're going to have something that looks like table, not going to be a head, it's just going to be a body. Yeah, so we'll have tr I'm going to say TD testing. So we might have these, so we'll just say page on each of those. So those are standalone pages, but then we're going to run into the problem of, okay, we've got to have a nested section, so we can do that as a row, give it a single table cell with a call span of, I guess 1 in this case, just in this example. And this is just me roughing this out, so this isn't going to be the actual, well, it may actually end up being it, but if it is, it's a happy accident. So what I'm thinking is you've got your individual rows, then you've got potentially a section. So let's give these names. So we'll say documentation section. So I'll do that, and then just to be obnoxious. And the nice thing is when we actually implement this, it's all going to be through like JavaScript maps, because we're just going to be mapping over database data. So this is typically how I'll start it. I'll start with hard-coded data and just manually copy and paste stuff to get the UI fleshed out. Then once I'm done with that, I'll go back and I'll just implement the automated map over the data. And that helps quite a bit, because when you're trying to do your UI layouts and design at the same time you're wiring in your data, it can get the hamster going. It's really difficult. So this way, technically I guess it's a little bit slower, but it does make sure that when you do your implementation, it's a lot less overwhelming for you. So here we're going to do, now, and this is where you got to be careful. So now it's a whole brand new table. And this is where, I think we can get away with that. Yeah, because we're inside of a cell. So we'd have something like section title. And then in this table, we would have, we could just copy this. And I just realized I used the wrong name on the top one. So we're going to say, there you go. Documentation page, documentation section, and then all these would just be page. And I believe we got to get this table wrapped in a div with class name of table to get it to play nice with the Bootstrap styles. So on the CMS, that's all I'm using. I'm just using Bootstrap 5, I think. Okay. So get you part of the way. Well, hold on a second. Why? No, that's right. Table. Oh, the class name's on the table itself. Oh, I know what I'm thinking about. It's like this. Yeah. Okay, so we've got table on the outer table, and we want table on the inner table. Yep. Okay, so this header should look like crap. That's expected. This is now taking on the Bootstrap styling for the list. Yeah. So now we can add our own custom styles in and start to make some sense of this, which, yet again, we're going to pull from here if we can. Where did I do the styles on this one? Oh. Yeah, so like this is the one of the things that I changed when I went to do the Next.js boilerplate that you folks have access to. I started out doing this in the prototype, and I was like, I really don't like this. And then that was the thing that led to this .css.js pattern. Was like, oh, okay, there's got to be a way to separate this, keep it more organized. So for now, we're going to tough it out. Oh, I'm actually surprised. It looks like there's not really much to it. I was expecting more. Table has background. Okay, so this is what I'm after. So let's start with that. just to add some contrast between the individual table rows and the actual. And I'm just putting that in there. Yeah, okay, there we go. So you've got your main table. That is gonna drive me nuts. So what I'm talking about is right here, when there's a section, I want a gap between this and this. Technically it's right because of the styles that we just applied, and the markup that we've got, but visually it might be kind of confusing. So I want a gap between standalone pages in each of the sections, as well as the sections themselves. So there should be a like 20 pixel gap between each group or break in the flow. So what that means is this gets a little tricky because that necessitates two separate tables. I think. No, it doesn't. It's like a how do you do that? Well, let me comment this for a second. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just focus on the documentation section that we've got here. Style that first, and we'll work backwards from that. I think that'll make this a little easier. What do I do? DDD. So okay, and then can I get away? I don't think I can. No. Oh, sacrilege. No, you can't do that either. So, what was the structure? I could say TD. Let's try that. And this may seem like excessive because it's like, well, isn't this just your own CMS? Nobody else is using this. Like, this isn't customer facing. And yes, that's true. But the thing that I've learned throughout all of my time doing this is that the time that you invest in building your tools that you use to run the business or to do the thing, the more time that you invest in those up front, the more time you save later. So the time that I've saved by having, and let me give you an example. So if I go into here, and I thought this at the time, I was like, oh, that's excessive. But these little things start to help you. There it goes. So like this over here, when I do asset uploads, let's see if I can get it. I took the time to build a little thing that allows me to copy and paste a figure, which is the full markup for an image on a post. So in the moment, it took me, I think, a couple of hours to get it going. Let's see, date modified. Perfect. So if I upload this, so now I've got copy URL, copy figure, and I can do that as I'm writing a post. So when I'm writing content for you guys, it's a lot easier and a lot faster day to day than it would be if I had to sit here and be like, okay, figure, all that stuff. So I look for little bits like that, whether it be at the feature level or the design level or something like that. I'm always looking for little things like, would future Ryan like this? Or somebody that's working with future Ryan like this. And that's another angle to this too, is hopefully, assuming that this is compelling enough and I can start to make some substantial money with it, I can hire other people and they get to use these tools too. So when they show up, I want to make sure that what they're using works and it works well. So I figure, hey, worth the fussiness. And I'm a computer geek, so this is fun. I'm enjoying myself doing this stuff. I know that's perhaps a little patronizing because most developers hate CSS, but it's how I got my start, so it works out. Okay, so documentation section TD. And we're going to use an immediate child selector. That little, what is that? That's a greater than symbol. So that's saying only select the TD that's the immediate child of documentation section. So that way you don't have any nested TDs taking on these styles. It'll only be that first level. So here, what were we saying? We were going to say 50 pixel. And this is just me making this up. I knew it was going to do that. Can I do a margin? I guess it's no on a TD. No. All right. Well, okay, use your brain. So what do you know to be true? Well, the TD works. That's how you do it. So we're going to group all of that together in a div. And then we're going to target that div, and I think that'll work. But we got to be more careful here. So it's now documentation section TD div. And I'm going to do the same exact thing. So I'm going to use another immediate child selector. Yes. And then instead of this taking on those styles, this is going to take on those styles. Get rid of them up here. That's right. Ryan 1, robots 0. At least for now. Should probably shut up because they're recording this to their hard drives, and I don't know, when Skynet goes live in 100 years, they're just going to be like, that guy's first. He spent most of his life saying that we were evil. And then they cut my head off, and, well, I was right. Don't trust robots. Or Elon Musk trying to put doohickeys in your head. It's like, like that's a little too far, man. I don't want to turn to a robot. What am I confused by? Everything. Okay. So those are bootstrap styles. So let's do this goober. Let's say padding 0. There we go. Starting to feel like a real thing. So let's do documentation section header. So now I'm second guessing myself because of this new structure. Yeah, we're going to do this just to be extra careful. Yeah, TD div header. So this, padding 20. Yeah, there we go. And now I can get away with stealing the course styles. Because I do want this to look consistent. There it is. Yeah, let's just go ham and steal the whole thing. We don't need all of it, but I'll move this a little bit quicker, so I should be able to go like that. Close enough. This will look a little weird to start. But what was I doing? You know what? We should pop this in another tab so we don't have to keep flipping back and forth. So we're going to say localhost 5002 docs tester. There we go. What was the structure I used here? This one was a little more forgiving. Yeah, because it's actual sections. So I've got a body. Okay. Yeah. Man. I was going to say we could do a nested table again to achieve the effect. So the effect that I'm going for is this spacing around the actual list of pages within a section. But that's that markup is going to be horrible. What you're refreshing for? Well, screw it. Let's do it. So we get back to the same problem as before. No, we don't. We do, but we don't. I'm not thinking. Because we're already in a div, nice. So this is where immediate child selectors come in. I can do that. And we can just give this a class name to separate it out. So we'll say this is documentation section pages. That will work. I'm going to worry about those fringe styles in a sec. So what did I just say? Documentation section. And this one is really specific, so we don't have to do all the preceding selectors. Can if we want to be absolutely specific, but in this case, that name isn't likely to be replicated anywhere else. Meaning within this page, that could be used somewhere else in the CMS, but because we're using style components, all of our CSS is encapsulated, so you don't have to really worry about it. And I'm kind of paranoid here. We're streaming. Yeah, we're good. I feel like ever since I think it was the very first stream that I did. I started the streaming software, everything was running, but I didn't push the go live button on YouTube. And so fortunately I recorded that one and didn't just rely on YouTube's capture. So now I'm a little bit paranoid. But here we are. So what was I just saying? I said documentation section pages. That's standalone, so we don't have to worry about it. Gotcha. So we're going to say padding 20 pixels on that. And it looks like I am wrong. What am I inside of? Documentation section pages. Ooh, that's not a name collision, but it's a little goofy. Yeah, I'll live with it. Okay, so what's the mistake? Let's inspect. Oh, it's just lagging. Okay, I was gonna say. That should have worked. Yeah, the styles on this are gonna be a little freaky deaky, so let's just play with it. So we're gonna say this gets a background fa. I can live with that because the inner pages are gonna get their own styling, and so it works out. So before we go any further, just to give this a little more structure here. What am I thinking? So this is going to be TRTD. So you got documentation page. Oh, we can just do it on documentation page, even better. So we'll say, let's close that. We'll come back and clean that up. So we'll say documentation page. What if I just set the background on that? Nice. Okay. Now. There we go. Now we're starting to get a little structure. Where are you coming from? Table, documentation section pages. Immediate child selector, because we only want to access this one table. We'll say margin 0. There we go. So now nice, and it's like a food saver bag, a little vacuum thing. Just pull it all in. It's a disgusting noise. Okay. So, this, I think we still have that comical 50 pixels on here as a tester. Yeah, we do. So let's tighten that up. That should be 20. There we go. And there's another table. So this one needs to be documentation sections, pages, responsive tables in there. All right, fine. So documentation sections, pages, responsive table, and then table. Yeah, that did it. Okay. Now this is feeling a little closer to what I had in my head. Yeah, so you've got your documentation title, you've got top level pages. So this is essentially just mimicking this sidebar navigation. That's the goal. Then you go in, you edit each page in the editor. That controls the content. This is auto-generated, so we don't have to have a way to do that. This is just going to be markdown content like a post that you see on the site. So that should get us where we're going. Pretty close, at least. Yeah. Okay, so this kind of sucks. You can't do margins on those. You can do divs, though. What am I fussing about, though? Because this is just one after the next. It's not doing, whatchamacallit. No, that's okay. I think the thing that's bugging my eye is I don't have the header. So let's throw that in there. Yeah, and that information would actually be helpful. So knowing the last time I updated the docs. I try to limit the extra amount of stuff that I add just for the sake of styling, but sometimes it works out. That's the TD. Where's the header? There it is. Sure. So and then we're missing, I just realized, a table body. Is that right? No. There you go. Alright, so did it break anything? Kinda. That's the only downside to those immediate child selectors is that if you start changing the markup structure, then it falls apart. So what did I just introduce? A T-body. So the header's still there. Oh, because the table is the thing that gets the... I see. Alright. So... where'd it go? Yeah, you have section title, documentation section, pages. Ooh, that's twisting my melon up. Why? Documentation section pages, and then you have the table. The table contains both of these. Okay. I see what's going on here. So I'm getting confused because there's only one TD, But that's correct. That's what the table's supposed to do because I've got all these columns up here. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 columns, but only one cell. So I could do something like this just to get us moving. So I say col span 4. And that should, yeah. So that pops it all the way across, but then we still have the background looks kind of crappy because we put this on the individual pages, not on the overall table. So we want to say documentation section pages table is what gets the background and the border. So documentation section pages table gets that. Wait a minute, what did I just do? I didn't change any of that. Oh, see? Yeah. So we do want, well, we can do that, that's okay. So these styles technically apply to documentation page, so let's hoist that up. That we can get rid of. So I want to say documentation section pages. Okay, so yeah, this class is used for the standalones as well. So documentation section, so let's do it right here. So we're gonna have documentation page gets those styles as well. Yeah, there you go. But what's the fuss about? No. Okay. Yeah. So you've got your individual pages at the top. You got your sections. Those sections can have pages. We want to drag and drop all this between all this stuff, which is the tricky part. But I think we can just do linked drop targets. Yeah. So let's see here. So you got page. Give me a second. I get my bearings now. What should we do? So let's flesh this out because this looks like crap. So I want to jump back to, yeah, here. What am I looking for though? I'm looking for the TD cells. Let me check. All right. So we are TD cells. We're not TD cells. We're focusing on the TD cells. So we're going to say TD, 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 TD. So where are each of the pages? Yeah, so instead of this col span craziness, we'll actually implement 4 columns. There we go. And then it looks like this is text center. Yeah. So, or no, you gotta be careful. That's not right. This is the problem with the copy and paste, is that it can really confuse the hell out of you. So it's the 1, 2, 3rd and 4th column, or 3rd and 4th cell in each column. There you go. So those two, and why I'm doing this will make sense in just a sec. So I want to say text center. There we go. Okay. Page, 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 page. So let's put some, yeah, okay. So let's nuke that. Save it, looks fine, yep. Alright, so we're going to say this is page 1. And let's use some real data from over here. So we've got components. So this will be creating a component. this will be components. This will be, I don't know, let's say 23 hours ago. 15 hours ago. How did that happen? It was only created 15 hours ago, but let's flip those just so we don't get confused. Minor detail, but you know. Okay, so we've got our list there, so let's copy this structure up to here. Yeah, so same idea. Clear out the old duplicates. Oh, the number isn't really necessary. No, because the order is implied by the drag drop, so let's get rid of that. Looks kind of goofy doofy. Get rid of that. There you go. Ooh, I don't know if I like that. There's a reason that's happening, but what is it? Oh, okay, it's only got call span 1. Get rid of that. Oh, if it wasn't that, what was it? What? I feel like I broke the markup or something. That's kind of confusing. Okay, turn that off. That is 100%. That's really bizarre. If I say call span was at 3. Huh. This is why tables will drive you nuts. So it looks like, yeah, that kind of makes sense. Because I'm nesting this. This is technically a table row. And see, this is where the styles will trip you out. So this is all a table right now. And so the sibling row that was outside of this row was controlling the layout of the sibling. So it was collapsing to match that there was only one column of data inside of that next row, which is interesting. So we gotta keep an eye on that. Okay. So the only thing I'm not gelling with here is the lack of a header. So take this. Where'd it go here? This one, yeah. It's gonna be up here. Yeah, that'll end up looking a lot better. So let's do, how did we do that? This. Ah, but it's not. Goodness. See, there's pluses and minuses to doing it this way. TR. So if I say, let's try this. I think that'll work. Yeah. And then if I do a border on that, it should adapt. Perfect. Okay, that's what I want. So this is quite the selector is what that is. Yeah, documentation sections pages, responsive table, table. Okay. Documentation section pages, sections pages. So this is up here. And then I'm saying responsive table, table. Oh, okay. So it's after this. So you're saying, okay, on the responsive table, give me the table, give me the T head. Yeah. And then the TR inside of that, and there's only one. Let's do a hard refresh, make sure it worked. Yes, okay. Whew. There we go. So we're looking halfway decent now. And now it's starting to feel like what I was hoping for. So now for the hard part. So now we got to get, I'm debating doing drag and drop and just putting it on state to begin with. Technically, this doesn't have to hit a database yet. Yeah, let's do that, because I'd rather get the hard part out of the way now, because once we get that in place, the data is not too difficult. So we'll say jump to the course stuff. If I remember, it's pretty straightforward. It's not really doing a whole lot. There's just one. Yeah, I use this React sortable JS library. Though I use an older version of it because I found that the newer one is a little wonky. Maybe it's probably been fixed since the last time I would play with this. Yeah, let's just go ham with it. And we'll say, and where do I put that? I put that as the, and this is what you have to watch. So this sortable component that package exports, you specify a tag that it's supposed to wrap the drag and drop list with. So in this case, we want to replace the T body tag, but we don't want to change the type of the element. We just want to wrap it and replace it with the drag and drop. So I believe we can start here. We got to be a little bit careful. So give it a name. We'll say, I'm just going to be naive about that one. Just say documentation pages for now. This, what was I doing? Sort. Oh, changing the sort order of the, so that we are going to need. So let me say console.log, change post to pages. Okay, so we got pages, T-body, get rid of that class name because I don't think we need it just yet. And then there's a trick. I think they each need data ID, yeah. So what I mean by each of them, each of the children of this sortable component needs a data-ID attribute. So ultimately this will be the ID in the database, but for now I'm just going to say ABC123. Because really we're just concerned about proof of concept right now. Let's say DEF456. Yeah, so we only care right now about that initial, so meaning that top level sortable. Because again, we're going to have to nest this. Yeah, imported it. Okay, let's see what happens. Does it explode or does it work? It worked. Oh, cool. Yeah, and it does shift it header ends up looking a little booty, but that was what I was hoping for, is that exact interaction. So I can put an entire section at the top, or I can move individual documents around sections. So that's at least a proof of concept. And now I'm thinking this header kind of sucks. It just looks goofy if it doesn't have anything. All right, let's rip. All right, you know what? Comment it. So we'll hang on to it. Maybe it'll come back. Now see, if I drag it over this right now, it's not accepting it, but if we connect them together, I forget what the selector is, but if we connect them together, I should be able to drop into a section as well, which is what I want. And then if we get that, then we're in business, because then it's just mapping. So and we should be getting something. Yeah. So right now, let me clear this out. So whenever I change the order, I get back an array telling me the order of those data IDs relative to the list. So technically ABC123 is hard-coded as the first one, but because I'm dragging and dropping that beneath DEF, that gets shifted to first in the array, and then I get the next one. So that's the mechanism that we use to update the order on the server, and we'll see that eventually. So what we're going to do is say, okay, go ahead and map over that array and set the order relative to the ID. Okay. I think we gotta do. Yeah, I'll have to write some extra CSS, so like add margins between. Well, let me try that. What if we change this instead of just margin top to top and bottom? Yeah, okay, that's what I was. Hold on, I got a plan. I think this will work. So what was it? Documentation section. Where are you? Oh, okay. So basically I'm saying documentation section. Yeah. Can you do it with the last child? No. So this is it the last child? Yes. Of the T body. But that's not what has the margin. So section TD div. Okay. But now when I drag it, it's not the last child anymore, so it takes on the 20 pixels until it's the last thing in the list, which is exactly what we want. Very cool. I don't know what that little hanging border is up at the top. I think that's just because the placeholder jumped. I'll have to come up with something for that, but very nice. Okay. So what time is it? All right. Probably got another 45 minutes in me. So we'll finish up around 9 p.m. Central Time. So that actually went smoother than I expected. So let's try that nested one. And maybe we'll get lucky there too, but I don't remember. Group. I'm almost certain that that is the way that it. Oh, well, let me make sure I'm looking at the right one. So I'm almost certain that that. Well, let's. just look at the docs. Sortable.js. No, I want the GitHub. They've got a pretty good README for this, if I remember correctly. Oh boy. Is it you? Yes. Yeah, I remember this section for some reason. Okay, so, but let's make sure we're on the right version just in case. So we're in CMS. Sortable.js 110.2. I think I'm pretty, oh, not that far behind. Never mind, I thought I was using an old version. Not bad. Okay. So what we're looking for in here, and I think it is group. Filter. And this may look a little different. So this is Sortable, the underlying library. I'm using React Sortable, which is a wrapper around this. So that's why I went to the Sortable docs to reference this specific, or to answer this question, is because this is the underlying API. The React component just adds props, basically, as the settings that you can pass. So like options here, on change, all that stuff. That's the React Sortable.js package, but under the hood, it's running Sortable.js for you. So we want to reference this as our API that we're working with. But the thing, what's this say? Drag elements from one list to another, yeah. Both lists must have the same group value. You can also define whether lists can give and keep a copy. Well, that makes sense. Because they're all documentation pages. We just need to know when it updates which list did they drop it into, which we will be able to get from an ID or something like that. So that should work. It's a little trippy, but I think it'll work. Yeah, so swap that. Set that. You can pull and put, everything else should be exactly the same. Yep. So it doesn't persist because I'm not using whatchamacallit. So let's change the name of that doc on top so we can visually confirm this. There it is. So we'll call this introduction. Yeah, so that sorts within that sublist as well. So now the only thing we need to do, I'm actually quite shocked that it was that straightforward. So what we need to do is make sure that we know where the drop is happening, which we do because the on-change handler is specific to that group. So just to make sure that that's clear, we're going to say, I'll just say section ID. So that'll ultimately be replaced with the actual ID of the section as it exists in the database. Yeah. And this is important to note. So Sortable.js will automatically add a random ID to an element if you don't supply a data-ID element. And it looks like, no, this top one didn't get one. So let's add that. Where'd it go? There it is. Oh, this has ABC 1, 2, 3, D, E, F. But this, that's what it was. This row doesn't have it. So we'll say data ID. Where do we have D, F, G, H, I? 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, clear that. Now this should make a little more sense. Yes. Okay, so introduction on the bottom. If I put introduction on the top. Beautiful. Okay, so that's working. All right, so I think modals are next. Yeah. I hate modals. I love modals because I like the ability to pop up a UI, but implementing them drives me nuts for some reason. But you gotta do what you gotta do. So yeah, let's do that. So let's go to courses again. I think we can copy that pretty much verbatim. There's not really anything that's unique about it. And I instinctively scrolled to the bottom of the component because that's usually where I put all my modal components. So to the bottom of the course index because we're going to have all the modals at the index level. So we've got course modal, course section modal. So we basically just need these two. So let's start with section modal. There it is. All right, so I'm just going to copy this verbatim to start. So this is going to be documentation section modal. And we're going to say index.js. Spit that out. Documentation section modal. We'll ignore all that stuff for now because that's definitely going to change. So all we care about is a title, so that's still correct. Component will receive props. Course section, yeah, that's true. Documentation section. So this will come into play once we're connected back to the database because this modal will be used both for creating a new section as well as editing an existing one. So editing the title of that section. That's all fine. This needs to be documentation section. That's still fine. We might get lucky here. Create section. So this is going to be handle refetch documentation. And typically I'll forget about stuff like that. So I'll just let the compiler throw the error and tell me the thing that I forgot to add as a prop or an option somewhere. Course ID. So this is going to be documentation ID. That all looks correct. So this is going to be create documentation section mutation. There it goes. Okay, so this is going to be update. Update documentation section mutation. There we go. So the idea being that we're either creating one or we're updating an existing one. So change that. It's going to be documentation section modal. And I'm reluctantly using the Bootstrap jQuery stuff. There's a time and a place to be upset by it. Technically, I could be using, what is that called? React Bootstrap, which is similar to the sortable JS thing. It's just a wrapper around Bootstrap and implements all the JS as React components, but that drove me nuts for several years because there's a time lag between the Bootstrap versions, like the official Bootstrap versions, and React Bootstrap, which I don't blame them because it's a lot of work to do that. But it was frustrating because there were times where I wanted certain features or a certain style So like the shift from Bootstrap 3 to 4, where all the styles changed, that was a pain in the butt because there was like a year-long gap where React Bootstrap didn't implement the new stuff, and so that was the nail in the coffin for me. I was just like, okay, let me just do it by hand. And so far, I know there's the long fabled rumor, and it's technically not a rumor, it's correct. It's just rare that you bump into it. Is that you want to avoid using jQuery with React because jQuery can, in certain circumstances, affect the underlying DOM, which can screw up React's rendering and break all that stuff. But how long have I been using React? 6 years now, I think. I've never run into that issue. So it's got to be something where you're deliberately trying to pull the rug out from under React. So documentation section modal, this needs to be handle refetch documentation, good guy, VS Code. Course section ID, so this is going to be documentation section ID. So this is the section that we're updating in this context. So that should all work. Documentation section modal. Documentation section. Documentation section title. Create new section is generic enough, so that's fine. Okay, so this should work. So let's pull this back into the root of documentation. Yeah, so we're going to say documentation section modal from where are we going? Components. Documentation section modal. It's an index file, so we don't have to add the rest of it. And where did we steal that from? Here. Yep. So I'm just doing that so I don't have to go back and forth with the API for the props. I can just change everything here. So we'll say documentation ID. And this is the ID of the documentation we're currently trying to edit the sections for. This will be documentation section, assuming that, actually that is correct. Selected documentation section. That'll come into play later once we actually hit the database. But we do want to keep it because it does have a point. Got a little hum in my headphones. Okay, so selected documentation section. This one is handle refetch. Documentation. This is selected documentation. This is going to be eventually handle fetch documentation. Let's spec that out. So that little doodle, that's one of my snippets built into VS Code, which I have been meaning to take those snippets and formalize them for CheatCode Pro subscribers. So if that's something that you're interested in, at me on Twitter at CheatCodeTuts, or my personal at Art Glover, and I will get on that. Just need a nudge. But there's all kinds of goodies in there. Yeah, that, I'm just gonna comment just so it doesn't break something. Okay, so how did this work? Because I remember I was using the Bootstrap, like I think they use data attributes or something to open modals. Yeah. But let me pull it off of this one. So you've got, yeah, it uses that. So when I click on that, Bootstrap intercepts the click event. That's the only thing I don't like about doing this outside of whatchamacallit, React Bootstrap, is because you've got to use goofy conventions like this. So yeah, modal, and we're going to say documentation section modal. This will be documentation page modal. Or no, it won't. No. This isn't going to be a modal at all. So this is going to end up being is that true? I always forget. Oh crap. So if I say new lesson, oh yeah, okay, it will be a modal. Take that back. It's gonna redirect away. That's what I thought it was doing by default, but it's not. Say documentation section modal. No. Page modal. Okay, so now jump back. Oh, duh. There you go. Documentation ID is not defined. That is correct. So we're going to pretend to pull that off of state. That we just defaulted, so that does exist on state. Let's see what else. There we go. And there we go. So we got our section modal. So let's go ahead and quickly wire up the page one. And then that will get us close to a stopping point here. And this is about what I thought. This is going to take us, this is like the bulk of the work for this whole project, meaning the documentation is the CMS wiring. Because like we saw, the database stuff we were able to get done in like 1.5 sessions, 2 sessions. This may end up being 3. We got, well, maybe not. Because once we get to the point where this is organized in the database by order, this is pretty straightforward. Yeah, it should be straightforward because we're just going to have the list. And then we'll just render the sections based on the type. So we'll store it in the database either as a section or a thing. And then we'll say, okay, give me that section back with its children. So that may not be too bad. But definitely a to be continued later. So let's finish this out for the evening. So we're going to say copy documentation section modal. To become documentation page modal. Okay. Documentation page modal. I think we can do a find and replace on most of this. And I'll create update page. So we got our page mutation. Oh, update. Okay. Update documentation page, create documentation page. That's already implemented. The page is gonna need documentation section ID. Documentation page. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm just yawning. I gotta start doing these in the morning or something. Instead of sitting up late. I've been working all day and then I do this. See, documentation page model. Yep, just like last week, I'm starting to hit that like fuzzy period where I'm like, what are we doing? What is this about? I don't know where I am, man. I took this brownie from this guy and, you know, I just ended up here, man. You know, just like life. You know, things just happen this way. Hippies. I know they're a protected class, but difficult. I'm kidding. Create new page. Handle, set title. I'm definitely gonna miss something on this one. Documentation page. This is page. Yep, there it is. Titanic's going down. It's going quick. Maybe I won't make it the full 45 here. Let's at least get this on screen though. This is going to be, I believe, page ID. Oh, wait. See, get rid of that. We don't need that in this context. Because again, the page is going to be edited through the main editor. So this is correct. Creating the page. But it will always be handle create page. So where's handle submit? Because we can just say handle create page. And skip all this. And because we're creating the page, we don't need its page ID because it doesn't exist yet. So that's good. That is a chicken and egg problem of immense proportions. Handle refetch docs. Yeah, we still want to do that. I think we got it. Let's find out. So I'm just going to copy this down. Auto. Nice. So selected documentation section. We'll have to figure out how to do that. I think I know how. Selected documentation section. Handle fetch documentation. Yeah, that'll work. So net auto imported. Yes. So now let's take, we already did it. Here we go. Okay, so that gets us up to the point where we've got a way to create or edit a section and a way to create a page. So let's close this out with this. So basically I want to make sure when you click on this icon, what's it doing? So when you click on this icon, it pops the modal as well. And it allows you to add a new, no, new page makes sense because if you want to, it's either going to be out here or in here, so you just want to add it to the main list. Okay. And it'll be a draft by default, so even if they add it, we should add something like that, like draft status, so you know. That's secondary stuff. Okay, so editor. It's just a little pencil. I think we kept the styles from earlier. I remember something about an icon. Is it in here? Yes, I think that's right. That I is the icon. Ooh. Where am I looking? There it is. Okay. Say I class name. It's FAS, FA pencil. So this is the font awesome library. Okay, those styles did not take. So that must be for something else. Documentation section. No, that looks right. Documentation, TD div header. I. Oh, okay, expects it to be nested in an H2. Oh, no, I'm gonna do it that way. Yep. Okay, so then my question would be, what was the thing that I attached? And there you go. So I'm just gonna hard code this because eventually that's what we're trying to do is take this, and this will actually, I take that back, this will be an entire object so we can reference a section, its current content inside of the modal. So if we save that, we should get refresh. Nope. Oh, it's missing something, isn't it? Yep, data toggle. So that is the data attribute that tells Bootstrap to attach the listener to that element. Yep. And because we're not setting anything right now, it still says new, but we want it to change to edit documentation section once we get it. All right, I'm tapping out, but that's really good progress. That's way further than I thought we were gonna get, to be completely honest. And that actually puts us in a really good place to next time just focus solely on data. Yeah, so do I want to call it? What should we do next time? So next time I think what we're going to do, yeah. So we'll wire this up. Same with this. So get that connected to a backend. We'll handle, should be able to finish the sorting. So I talked about this array down here. We'll basically say, okay, I don't know if you can see that because of the, whatchamacallit, scroller. So this that I've highlighted right here, basically we can take that, use that to figure out what our order is going to be at the database level, and then go from there. And then assuming that we're really lucky and that all goes super fast, then we'll finish up the CMS side of it completely and say, okay, let's add the index of all the documentation and update the nav up here. And then after that, assuming this is all working and we can see the data updating, then we'll shift our focus back to the front end, work out fetching the lists, the content, and then we'll get into the final details like the search. And I believe, there it is. I also realized I have this little version selector, which would be kind of fun to implement. So that's going to require us doing some work with the GitHub API. So yeah, but good progress. I'm happy if you're happy. Yeah, that's a good night. So that's going to do it for me, folks. I'm tired, but thank you for hanging in there with me. Hopefully you're learning some stuff. If you are learning stuff or you do have questions, let me know in the comments, because that lets me know that you're watching these, you like them, and I should keep doing them. Because again, the goal is to not just do boring internal stuff. I would like to, at some point later this year, work on a full-blown SaaS app. So something that's going to be publicly accessible to other people. So we'll start that from scratch and do the same exact thing we're doing here. Do I want to hint at what it's going to be about? No, because technically I haven't decided. I have a short list of things that I'm like, ooh, that would be fun to build live. And I can tell you one idea is potentially going to be like a decentralized social network. So using something like Ethereum or one of the other decentralized blockchains. But we'll see, because I still got to do research. But if you haven't already tonight, make sure to hit the subscribe button down below. Also hit the notification bell, because as soon as I put these out, you want to jump in, catch it live. That's how you do it. If you haven't already, follow us on Twitter. So @CheatCodeTuts is how you get it. And if you're not on the newsletter, head over to cheatcode.co/newsletter, and you can pop your email in there. And that's where I publish announcements about these live streams, new tutorials, new courses, all that stuff. So lots of good things coming. Stay tuned, and I will see you next time, folks. Thanks for hanging out.